It's being called historic, bold, and ambitious. But will Canada's new multi-billion-dollar industrial defense plan actually work? I'm Ben Mulroney. The West Block starts right now.
Defending Canada means more than just increasing the size of our military. It also means the strength of our industries, the resilience of our economy, and our capacity to act independently when it matters the most.
It's Ottawa's biggest, most significant military plan to buy and build in Canada, another step away from American independence. We'll have reaction from military, industry, and investment experts right after this.
There he is.
Also on the show, the Liberal Party has added to their ranks once again. What does this mean for a possible majority without an election? David Akin will talk about that and the U.S. Supreme Court tariff decision. In announcing his new Buy Canada plan for supplying our military, the Prime Minister said when it comes to security, Canada cannot be hostage to the decisions of others. It was a clear step away from depending on the U.S. for arming our defense. Here's part of Prime Minister Carney's statement.
We are announcing Canada's first ever defense industrial strategy. It's a bold plan to get our armed forces what they need when they need it. It's a bold plan to scale Canadian defense companies and to put hundreds of billions of dollars into strategic sectors of our economy while creating over 125,000 high-paying jobs across Canada. Its framework is simple: build, partner, buy. First, we will build in Canada and prioritize Canadian companies. As a matter of policy, military procurement in areas where we have sovereign capabilities will be directed to Canadian firms first. Where we can't build alone, we will partner with like-minded allies, helping to attract investment, transfer intellectual property, and integrate supply chains so that public dollars flow back to Canada and Canadian jobs created right here. And only after exhausting those first two options will we buy from abroad. Even then, we will ensure the maximum benefits are returned to Canada throughout the value chain, including through a modernized industrial and technological benefits regime. The centerpiece of our new approach is the Defense Investment Agency, or DIA. The DIA will streamline and speed procurement. It will cut red tape, and it will expand domestic production. It has three fundamental objectives. First, to protect Canada's sovereignty, particularly in the Arctic, by ensuring our women and men in uniform have the tools they need to defend our country. Secondly, the DIA will work to build Canadian prosperity. And thirdly, we'll work to strengthen Canada's strategic autonomy, which means our ability to act independently in a more dangerous world.
We'll have reaction to Ottawa's plan for the defense industry and a tech investor expert. But first, reaction from the military side. And joining us now is General Tom Lawson, former Chief of the Defense Staff and Deputy Commander of NORAD. He was also a consultant for Lockheed Martin. General, thank you for your service and thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks, Ben.
What was your initial reaction to this announcement?
Well, relief that it was finally on the streets. I mean, it's no matter what we want to talk about, observers, on whether or not they've got all the priorities right, whether it's a compromise between industry and defense, whether or not the targets are correct, we have to recognize that this is a great step, very exciting for all sides. And I think it's an indication that the country is growing up, maturing, especially with respect to defense and security.
Now, when you were CDS, what was your experience visiting other countries when it came to defense industry and defense spending?
Yeah, whenever we would go to other countries, there was normally a day set aside to look at the wares that were being produced by their defense industries. I think it's because they had an incorrect idea of how much influence I might have had on the procurement system as Chief of Defense. Of course, the only thing true about that is I helped set the operational requirements, but after that, it was completely out of my hands and in the hands of other departments, mostly public works. Back when they would come back to visit Canada, it never even crossed my mind to take them to see Canadian defense industry. Partly not because we didn't have some industries, we did. They'll get bigger in coming years as a result of this strategy, but just that there was a huge divide between the military and business, and I think this strategy suggests that that's going to be broken down in a very positive way.
Well, that talk between industries is important. Money obviously doesn't solve all the problems. And there's, as an example, a historic flop. We can just look to America's USS Zumwalt warship stealth destroyers. They cost more than $22 billion in R&D alone. But the guns they were armed with didn't have ammunition because each round cost more than $800,000. And they didn't have the right range, so they're all being retrofitted. Now, that is an extreme example. But in your view, how can Ottawa and industry experts ensure that expensive mistakes like that aren't made?
Well, I think there will be some winners and losers. It will be the nature of research and development, and you've got to have competitors out there. And venture capitalists are going to get good at this. They're going to put money into the system, and the banks will get in there. And there's big, heavy pressure by the government to make sure that that oils this entire system. But I think if we use as our true North Star the defense operational requirements and go a little lighter on how many jobs are going to come out of each particular project and which region they will fill, I think that we will be able to come up with a good compromise between what defense industry can do and what the Canadian Armed Forces needs.
Well, there's been a lot of discussion, General, about whether Canada should stick to their purchase plan of the American F-35s versus buying Sweden's Griffin jets. Do you think this argument is more hearts than minds?
Yeah, I really do. And much as I, as a good Canadian boy, wish the F-35 was built here in Canada, part of it is $3 million a jet comes from Canadian industry. And we've been part of this project for 20 years, but boy, there isn't much political capital behind deciding to go ahead with all 88 F-35s. But I'm worried about that because over the next few years, as Canadian defense industry tries to catch up to where the government needs them to be for sovereign purposes, the Canadian Armed Forces, our men and women in uniform, are going to need certain pieces of equipment. And you've just brought up one of the most important. There is no fighter jet out there with combat capabilities, anything like the F-35, and that will be completely refreshed over every year for the next 30 years. So the F-35 is one of those really tough examples where we're going to have to make a tough decision to put money into the pockets of American defense industry while looking forward to a time when Canadian defense industry can meet that 70% target.
General, you're the board chair for the Conference of Defense Associations Institute. What's been their reaction?
Very positive, with a mix of skepticism. I mean, the fact is that I don't think any of us who have been in the military or been observing on the military for decades have ever seen a situation. We've seen governments that wanted to increase their investment in defense for good reasons. But we have not seen a time where this resonated like it does now with Canadians. Polls come out saying that 65% of Canadians want the government to put more money into defense and security. And this is at a time when we have a government that comes in doing it for a lot of good reasons, but they've also built up this political capital that's going to allow themselves to do it. Where the skepticism comes from is that political capital is only going to be around for so long. So this strategy has to turn into action. It has to turn into money flowing, contracts being signed, and some sort of procurement agility. And then the skepticism will start to fall, the confidence will build, and this will be a reinforcing upward cycle.
Yeah, so I think I hear what you're saying, that if this gets to a certain point, it'll be self-perpetuating. We won't necessarily have to view it as a cost each and every year because there will be additional benefits beyond the cost to the military.
Exactly the case. And we've got, 10 areas identified in the strategy where Canada has a bit of a jump start, in space and aerospace and simulator design and communications, some land vehicles, certain amount of shipbuilding. Now, when that gets heavily invested in, and not only in those large primes, but in the small and medium sized companies that come up with good ideas for developing sovereign capabilities, and that starts to move not only for Canadian purposes, but for export, it turns into one of those self perpetuating things that you just described, Ben.
General Lawson, again, thank you for your service and thank you for your time as always.
Thanks for having me.
Canada is already home to about 1,200 manufacturers involved in defense, and Ontario holds many of those companies. Now, for reaction from the manufacturing side, we're joined by Brendan Sweeney from Ontario's Trillium Network for Advanced Manufacturing. Let's jump right in. There are areas in Ontario that are known for manufacturing certain things in relation to defense. What's being made where in the province?
Sure. So let's go in Ontario, let's go west to east. And where we see the first substantial cluster is around London and Stratford. And that is focused on land systems manufacturing. And that is a lot of componentry that tracks into General Dynamics Land Systems Canada in London, which makes light armored vehicles. If we start moving to the east, we get into Waterloo region in the Western GTA. And you get some aerospace manufacturing, including a large Bombardier facility that isn't quite a defense manufacturer yet, but does make a few planes that end up getting upfitted, I believe, in Montreal or in Kansas, into reconnaissance planes. But you have a large aerospace manufacturing sector in Waterloo in the Western GTA. And then when we go a little further west and north into York region, you get a really nice cluster of companies that do machining, many of them for the aerospace sector, but not exclusively. And then you have electronics, and you have, really in York region and to some extent Ottawa, you have one of the only significant electronics manufacturing clusters in the country. Much of that is going directly to the defense sector. Some of that's going to the space part of the defense sector. We can include MDA in Brampton, making satellites and space robotics in that mix. And then one of the densest kind of agglomerations, concentrations of defense sector manufacturing in the province is in Ottawa. Perhaps no surprise, General Dynamics is operating there. There are a number of small companies doing really specialized componentry, machining, and electronics for the defense sector in Ottawa.
Obviously, there's a lot still we have to learn related to this announcement, but how do you see things possibly changing with this new injection of federal money?
Well, that's the question. That's a really good question. And what we're trying to figure out within this strategy, the strategy is a really good signal, but within the strategy, are we going to take a lot of these tier 3 and tier 4 suppliers that are in Canada, that are smaller Canadian owned companies, and are we going to make them bigger tier 3 suppliers and bigger tier 4 suppliers? So are we just going to help them scale what they do? Are we going to try to take some of those suppliers and move them up the value chain and turn them from, a component manufacturer to an entire system or module manufacturer? That's a pretty tall order. That would be ambitious, but hey, what good is doing this if it's not ambitious? Or are we going to take companies that are sophisticated enough to enter the defense sector, but just haven't done defense work yet, and help them enter the defense sector, which again is maybe a taller order than many are anticipating because of the really stringent requirements of the defense sector. But once you kind of cross that threshold, once you become a defense sector supplier, there will be a lot of work to do. And so for many, the cost of the investment could be significant, but the benefits could be even more significant.
Tell me, what's been the reaction to this announcement within the industry from those suppliers?
I think they're happy to see that there's something, and it is a strategy or the start of a strategy rather than an economic development brochure. So there's some real money attached. There's some real signals that we're going to focus on particular parts of the supply chain, leverage particular strengths, And I think, like a lot of people, there are those in industry who just want, who crave detail, and rightfully so. And I think we will get detail as we go over the next months and even years. Again, I think this is a 10 to 15 year project, and that's fine. Trying to do this in 1 or 2 years would be a spectacular failure. So having a medium term and a long term vision to this is a good thing. And I think we just have to make sure that, companies that are interested in doing this understand that.
What was your initial gut reaction when you heard that this money was going to flow in?
I think some of the money's going to go pretty quickly. It sounds like a lot. And yeah, frankly, it is a lot, but it will, if there are 1,200 companies looking to get a piece of this and then more trying to get in, it might not be as the ability to spread that money amongst all those companies and more may not be as there may be more competition than people think, and that's fine. That's fine. Competition in this sector is good.
All right, Brendan Sweeney, still a lot to learn about from Ottawa. Thank you for your time.
You bet.
Joining us now from the investment side is Liam Gill, who leads the capital program at Mars, which is the largest innovation hub in North America. Liam, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
So you know something about matching creators with investors. And as far as this new defense initiative goes, you've suggested that the goal shouldn't just be military preparedness. So what do you think is missing?
I think if you look at Canada's national defense and what could potentially be an area of weakness for us, it's not just potential military attack or not economic coercion. It's also technological interference. We're very reliant on foreign technology, foreign companies, and we want to have more of those in Canada. We want to be able to have an AI that's native to Canada, so there's not a day that comes where our entire industry, banks, governments, corporations are using, let's say, Gemini or ChatGPT, and there's a president in 10 years from now who really wants the space in the Arctic, and the way that he goes for it is by saying, why don't you turn off that AI unless they give it to us?
If we were to compare this build-up to the U.S. during the Cold War, what are some takeaways that we can learn from, things we shouldn't do, and things we should emulate?
Yeah, I think one of the really interesting things about the Cold War spending and Silicon Valley is that Canadians often look at Silicon Valley and we wish we had that. We always talk about, hey, why do we have a Canadian YC? That was a conversation a few weeks ago. Well, Silicon Valley was built on the back of the Apollo program. It was built on the back of the US government purchasing 100% of all semiconductors built by Fairchild Semiconductors, funding HP, funding Stanford. Those are the founding fathers of Silicon Valley. So there's actually an opportunity here to fund those same technologies here, to get that same cycle of capital going, and to actually fund innovation for generations to come.
Do you have any security concerns about this entire project?
I don't have security concerns about our technology as long as it's built in Canada. I think one of the biggest concerns would be if we have data that's stored in the US, how can the Americans use that, right? The Patriot Act obviously gives them access to it. We also have the Cloud Act that allows American companies to access data they store overseas. So there's a lot of concerns if we don't control our own technology, cutting off data centers, potentially cutting off AI access. Things like that are not great for our national security. But if we have that at home, if we have Canadian companies governed by Canadian laws with Canadian values, then we're safe, we're secure, and we can rely on the technological foundation that we build the country on.
Liam Gill, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.